All right. Welcome. I'm so glad you're all here. This is going to be an absolutely amazing day with Willie Ito and Matt Brunet, aka AniMat. Let me share my screen and kind of get us moving here. I'm Judy Utall. I run Autism and Entertainment. A little bit about us. We were founded in well, we started in 2022, but we had our first conference 2 years ago in April of 2024. And our mission is about increasing employment for autistic talent in the entertainment industry. And we do that by expanding employment initiatives around diversity to include neural inclusion and changing how people view the autism brand as not being something broken, but bringing a number of individuals with talent and skills and passion, and about sharing resources with the organizations, the studios, the companies that will help them bring you on board, and finally enabling you to figure out your own career paths. We're driven by membership. And so if you're not already a member, we invite you to join. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. We have some upcoming webinars on the June 8th. We're going to hear from Miki Strauss, who will talk about how to leverage your skills in Minecraft and Roblox in a career in game design. And a week from Friday, we're going to have a discussion about membership. And we're adding a whole bunch of new features to our websites and things we do. And that'll be the purpose of that meeting. So I'm going to stop sharing. Let me find Matt. There you are, Matt. I'm going to spotlight you for everyone. And then there's Willie, and I'm going to spotlight you for everyone. And now I have the both of you. Thank you. Matt is a good friend of Autism and Entertainment, and myself and my son. He speaks every quarter about different animation shows or films or historical outlooks. And we always love to have him here. And Willie Ito, we're going to learn a lot more about today. Hi, Matt. Hi, Willie.
Hi.
Hi. All right. So, yes, it is with great pleasure that I have this opportunity to talk with the man who has a very admirable legacy in animation, working for Disney, Hanna-Barbera, Warner Brothers, and more. So, I might as well go into the first question. Willie, how are you today?
I'm hanging in there, doing quite well. Beautiful day in Los Angeles.
Great to hear. Great to hear. So I might as well get into a little bit of my psychologist mode and might as well go and ask you, let's go and talk about your childhood. Let's get into the very beginning. What was it that first got you interested in animation? How was your childhood? How do you feel like did it develop to become who you are as an individual?
Well, it begins in San Francisco, where I was born, and at age 5, my father took me to the neighborhood theater, and sitting in front of this big screen in a living color, 7 little men marched across the scene singing hi ho, it's off to work we go. And I said, that's it. That's what I want to be. Not one of the 7 dwarfs, but an animated cartoonist. And so at age 5, my future was pretty much cemented in my head. And I just pursued it all the way. And then, of course, in 1941, due to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Japanese American community was ordered to be interned in a concentration camp. There was 120,000 of us from Seattle to San Diego that with a month's notice, we were told to pack up whatever you could carry with your two hands and go inland. And my camp happened to be in the middle of the Utah desert. And coming from a cosmopolitan city like San Francisco, suddenly finding yourself living in the middle of a desert in barracks that was basically a wooden structure covered with tar paper. So there was no insulation. Winter was harsh. Summers were hot, and our only protection was a layer of tar paper, and so it was somewhat miserable. I found that being incarcerated and not really having too much activity at that time, I stayed in the barrack and I just drew and honed my cartooning skills. And then 3 years later, when we left camp and came back to San Francisco, we I started back to school, and I always got a fairly good report card only because of my art classes that took me over the edge. Otherwise, academically, I was, so-so. And so when I graduated high school, I was attending San Francisco City College, taking art courses. And my art teacher was, I guess you might say, a sort of a mentor because he saw my abilities as a cartoonist. And so he arranged for me to have an interview at Chouinard's Art Institute, which is today known as CalArts, California Institute of the Arts, one of the leading schools for animation. And so I received a scholarship. So I came down to Los Angeles. And 2 weeks into my schooling, I found myself hired at the Walt Disney Studio in 1954. And my very first assignment happened to be the very iconic spaghetti kissing scene from Lady and the Tramp. And so that's basically how I started my 50-year career. I retired in 1999, and I'm still at it. I just can't get cartooning out of my system.
No, I understand. That is amazing. And one thing that is very fascinating with the story you just told is how there are moments where you were facing hardships, even getting into camps. How is it that you were able to lift up your spirits or manage to keep your spirits and your love for cartooning during those times? Is it just like your drawings that you were able to keep yourself motivated, or like basically when you're faced with those very dark times, how do you able to manage to get through those?
Well, fortunately, I was only 8 years old. So it was kind of, we sort of looked at it as being at summer camp. Uh, but then in retrospect, I think back to what my parents and grandparents and all that endured. It was quite rough. I'm not a jock, so most of my friends were out there playing touch football and baseball in the alkali dust, and I would just stay in and just draw and draw, and that was, I guess you might say, my little haven of comfort, you might say.
Nah, that makes sense. That is definitely the key of like you really found your cartooning when
Mhm.
drawings and tunes when they can get you out of like those kinds of situations. That is definitely your call.
Yeah, it
Now, to,
certainly was.
yeah, now to get into that you've managed to work at Disney and started your job really big with that iconic
I
scene in
know.
Lady and the Tramp. One thing that is worth noting is that at Disney, you also got to work with another animation legend, specifically Iwao Takamoto, and you were an in-betweener under him as well. What was it like working for Takamoto at Disney? And I believe, did you also follow him to Hanna-Barbera?
Yeah. Here's what happened. When we completed Lady and the Tramp, there was a little downtime, and so they asked us to take 3 months off before Sleeping Beauty was ready to come down the pike. And so with that 3 months, I figured, well, I'll go back to school full time, but you know. Not having an income, and I couldn't always depend on my parents to send me an allowance, so to speak. And so I called Warner Brothers, Looney Tunes, right up here, and they hired me. I left Disney on a Friday. Monday, I was now working at Looney Tunes or Warner Brothers Cartoons. Started at the infamous Termite Terrace, and I was mentored by Chuck Jones. But going back to your question about Iwo Takamoto was the very first Japanese American hired in 1945, fresh out of camp. There was a camp in California called Manzanar, and this is where Iwo Takamoto was spending his 3 years. And he was quite resentful because he was of that age to go to college when the war broke out. And so he was unable to pursue his higher education. And while he was in camp, he was encouraged by another Japanese American that worked at Walt Disney Studio before the war. And he says, you draw so well. Why don't you get a couple of 10-cent notebooks and just fill it up with your drawings? And so in 1945, when he left camp, he sent it to the Walt Disney Studios. They looked at it and they says, "This kid is good. We got to hire him." Sight unseen. That is, they didn't know what evil was, uh, and uh, and so during that period, most of us we were a little hesitant to seek any kind of employment, especially in Hollywood. And of course, back then we regarded it as the all white industry of motion picture. And so when I went to Walt Disney Studio for my first initial interview, it was Evo that came in and reviewed my portfolio. And then later, the production or personnel manager came out, handed me my portfolio back, and says, "We liked it very much, but don't call us. We'll call you." And I figured, well, I got 4 years at the Chenards. At that time, I will have a crackerjack portfolio. Then I would seriously go and look for work at Walt Disney. But 2 weeks later, I found myself at the studio taking the test, and I aced it. And after lunch, I was told that I was hired. And I'm thinking, gee, I only had two weeks of formal art training, and I was only 19 at that time, and so I was pretty much blown away. And so Iwo turned out to be my sensei, my mentor, and I worked under him, and he trained me at Disney. And then we parted company for 6 years because I went to Warner's. He stayed at Disney. And then years later, when Hanna-Barbera was really busy and they were starting a new show called the Jetsons, I was hired, walked into the layout room, and there sitting behind his desk was Iwo Takamoto. So that was our reunion, and worked under Iwo for the following 14 years. And he was one heck of a mentor. You know, I learned a lot, and I think most of us that worked under Iwo did learn a lot. And so it really helped my development, being a character designer, layout man, and so on and so forth. So Iwo was a great mentor.
That is great. Do you have a favorite memory with Iwo, whether it be in the studio or maybe just outside, like just meeting him as a person?
Well, first of all, I was very surprised when I met Iwo at the Walt Disney Studio, because I wasn't aware that there was another fellow Japanese American working there. And so when he walked into the conference room in personnel, I thought at first he might be Chinese or Korean or whatever. And then when I was introduced to him as Iwao Takamoto, I said, oh my goodness, he's the fellow Japanese American, you know. And then when we actually reunited at Hanna-Barbera, that's when I really got to know him well, you know, and I saw his. He was one, I guess you might say, really a wonderful artist, uh, not only in cartooning and developing characters for like Hanna-Barbera, but he was a very good life drawing, and he was self-taught. That was the thing. However, working with the famous 9 Men at the Walt Disney Studio, he really picked up a lot of good traits from them. And then he carried it on to Hanna-Barbera and was able to mentor like myself and a number of others. And so, you know, I look back and unfortunately, he's gone now, but I, you know, reflect on my days working with Iwo Takamoto, and uh, I think I think just working with him was everything I needed to know attending Chouinard's. So I got a good education from Iwo Takamoto.
That is wonderful. Just hearing about like his influence into you, and
Mm-hmm.
like it definitely helped you to also become, I would even say, about as great as Evo. But
Yeah.
also, since you have mentioned as well that you have also worked with Chuck Jones,
Oh my!
that is another part that is very, that's very fascinating with your career. That not just them, but also with many different iconic figures in animation, where along with working with Disney, along with being mentored by Iwo Takamoto, that you also got a chance to work with Chuck Jones. You got to work with Friz Freleng, both of which at Warner Brothers making the classic Looney Tunes, as well as working at Hanna-Barbera. Now, I would like to know um, who would you consider amongst the popular figures in animation that really stood out to you in your career, who would you say that you've admired the most during your career in animation? I mean, we have discussed about Iwo Takamoto. Are there any others as well, would you say?
Well, I think working with Chuck Jones was really a great experience. He was a fantastic mentor. He would take the time because I was the the young kid on the block, and he would take the time to come in my office, and he would pull up a chair, sit down, and we would talk about art and the philosophies of making animated cartoons, and because he was quite an intellect, and so we would get into very deep conversation. However, I have to say it was a one-way conversation because I, half the time I couldn't quite grasp what Chuck was trying to convey. But then later, when I would reflect, I said, "Oh yeah, Chuck was trying to, show me the way." Now,
Just show you the way of life, or animation, or
well, he would touch on life and the art of animation, and then he always felt that those of us that aspire to become animators or work in a business should be actors on the side. So I was encouraged to join an acting group, and we did Tea House of the August Moon, and I was one of the Asian leads in the play, and I was newly married at that time, but I was committed to go to the theater like 5 nights, well, 4 nights a week, and then on the weekend, uh, a matinee and an evening show. And my wife would patiently sit in the audience for every performance. And finally, one night I came home from one of my performances, and she says, "Honey, would you mind if I no longer attended the show?" I got ironing that's piling up, and I've got all this domestic stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, to have to sit through Tea House of the August Moon every night for 2 hours and whatever, it was probably an ordeal. So, but I stuck with the group. The group eventually became the East West Players, which is quite, I guess you might say, well known in our community. And but Chuck was right to know some of the basics as an actor does help our craft as an animator.
Interesting. Honestly, as an actor myself, that is very
Oh,
fascinating
okay.
and surprising to hear that you dabbled a little bit into acting. Um, in your experience, did you enjoy being an actor, or would you rather stick with acting with your pencil, so to speak?
Well, I'm kind of a ham at heart. So when I got on stage and the adrenaline started to run, and then I would hear the audience reaction, and I had some lines that was not quite as funny, but I would hear chuckle in the audience. So I figured I'm going to concentrate on these lines and really enhance it and make it my own. And then I would start getting some good hearty chuckles in the audience. And, the ham in me came out, and I thought, hey, that's great. I love this.
Oh yeah, getting that live reaction,
Yes,
getting like that response you want. Oh, such a satisfying feeling.
right, right.
Now, considering that you like going back into the subject of animation,
Yeah.
considering that you have worked on many iconic projects, some of the most well-known cartoons in history, starting off with Lady and the Tramp, and then you've been with Chuck Jones, where you actually, I believe you've done some animation for One Froggy Evening and
Yeah.
What's Upper Doc, from what I've seen in my research. And not to mention many Hanna-Barbera shows
Oh my.
from, from Yogi Bear, Flintstones, and even Hong Kong Phooey. Do you have a personal favorite animated project that you have worked on?
I'm often asked that question because of the multitude of shows that I've been involved with. And of course, the natural thing is, oh, it must be Lady from Lady and the Tramp, being that it was your first. And then I've always been known as a big Mickey Mouse collector, so that was the other assumption. And Hong Kong Phooey, you had a hand in creating the show and all that. And I said, yeah, well, it's on my list, but my very favorite character that I had the opportunity to be involved with was Chuck Jones's One Froggy Evening with J. Michigan Frog. So that has to be my all-time favorite.
Just out of curiosity, since you have worked on that, if we want to know specifically what did you do in the cartoons, like which scenes, if you can recall, that you have helped animated.
Well, the animator that I was assisting, Ken Harris, was quite an exponent on dancing. He himself was quite a good ballroom dancer and all that in his days. And so Chuck had him somewhat typecasted to work on anything that pertained to dancing, a musical rhythm and all. So in like What's Opera Doc, wherever Bugs and Elmer interacted and, Kill the Web and all that, the dancing uh, I was involved with. And of course, with J. Michigan Frog, hello, my baby, hello, all that dance, worked on all of that. And so it was a lot of fun. And I guess you might say I was somewhat of a twinkle toe back then. And so when Frizz did a cartoon called The Three Little Bops, that was the Three Pigs. They had a jazz group, and the Big Bad Wolf wanted to join by playing the clarinet, or rather the trumpet, I guess. And so while they were playing, they would be dancing. And so Jerry Shinneke, who was the animator, called me into his office and says, "Hey, I understand you know how to do the bop step." And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess. Uh, and so he had a Bolex set up in his room and says, "Would you go through the steps?" And then as I was doing it, he turned it on and, recorded my dance moves. And so he virtually followed my, I guess you might say, dance steps like rotoscoping. And so if you ever see the three little bops and the three pigs are dancing as they play, those are my steps.
Oh, I remember that cartoon. That was honestly a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
fun. And it's just such a throwback. It was like, I remember this. I remember those bops.
Yeah, yeah, it was
now,
great.
now let's go and fast forward a
Okay.
little bit to when you have decided to retire. That you
Oh,
went back to Disney a bit and you worked on some of the animated shows like the Wuzzles and the Gummy Bears. But then you ultimately decided to retire and shift your career where you didn't let go of that drawing side of you and decided to do illustrations for children's books. What made you decide to go and leave animation and take that step with your life?
Well, my writing partner, Shig Yabu, and we grew up in post-war San Francisco. So, we were, members of the YMCA. And then we had a basketball club called the Barons, which later turned out to be a social club. And then as we got to that age where we started to appreciate the young ladies. We would have Saturday night dances and all that, and I guess you might say I always enjoyed the social aspects, and so I was kind of known as the dancer in the group, and so we uh, anyhow. Then Shig joined the Navy, and then he moved down to San Diego. And then I was now attending Chenard's, and then of course he got married, I got married, and so we were socializing. So in 1999, when I retired, he contacted me and says, "Hey, would you be interested in illustrating his children's book, Hello Maggie?" And I said, "Well, Shig, after 50 years of drawing, I'm tired, and I think I'm gonna just hang up my pencils." But he was rather persistent. So I said, "Okay, Shig, send me the manuscript. Let me read it and see if it's up my, whatever, my style or whatever." Then when I realized that it took place behind barbed wires in a concentration camp, uh, history doesn't talk too much about the Japanese American incarceration. And so I would ask my kids, "Do you guys study that period uh, of our, the Japanese American uh, experience?" He says, "No, they may touch on it, but they never go into it." And I thought, well, I think maybe it might be good for me to uh, help illustrate Shig's book because it tells of our incarceration in a family-friendly manner. And so I said, "Shig, okay, I think I'll take on your project." And so I locked myself in my studio for about 10 days and finished illustrating Hello Maggie. And then we got it out there, but we couldn't find any publishers that would be willing to publish. I think maybe the subject matter, even though it wasn't uh, really heavy handed, the location and showing us being incarcerated was still a little sensitive. So we kept getting uh, rejections and all. So we decided to self publish it and made the rounds to the Japanese American communities up and down California and placed it in their bookstores and all that. And then it eventually got legs, and we had to print up more. And our last printing was up to 5,000 copies, and so hence I was invited to Florence, Italy, to receive a Cartoonist of the Year award. And I found that the Luca Ciarotti, who is the founder and the headmaster of the Nemo Academy in Florence, Italy, was a big fan of ours. He was myself, Jerry Eisenberg, and so he had amassed quite a collection of our drawings that we would dump, and it would somehow find its way to Heritage Auction, and Luca would buy our drawings and all. And so when I discovered a copy of Hello Maggie on his desk, I said, "Hey, Luca, you know, would you entertain the fact that Hello Maggie might be a good project for your advanced animation students to tackle as an animated film?" And then he kind of was, in a thoughtful mood, and said, and then we both laughed about it and forgot about it. Then about 2 years later, I got contact from Italy saying, "Willie, we're going to do Hello Maggie." And so that's how that happened.
So that's ultimately like through that interaction, suddenly Hello Maggie just became this animated short that grew much bigger than this little book that you started publishing yourself. So
Correct.
a little bit of an uphill journey. But I will say, with Hello Maggie, you ended up getting heavily involved to the point where you ultimately decided to get out of retirement and return to animation, working as a director on it. What is it? What is it with Hello Maggie that made you decide that you would go and return to animation for that particular project?
Well, I found it to be a project that I should be at the helm of. And since I myself personally experienced those 3 years, but like the old saying goes, once an animator, always an animator. It's hard to get it out of your blood or your system, because even after I retired and swore to my wife that no more hiding in my studio in the back room. I'm going to spend time with you and the kids, and we're going to travel and all that. But I found myself sneaking back into my studio, and there's nothing like pulling off a blank sheet of paper from the shelf, putting your pencil in the sharpener, and then start drawing. And that's a great feeling, especially if it's in your blood.
Yeah, I'm sure, definitely. Like even as an actor, like it's the same thing. Like once you get into your craft, it's hard to just let it go. And with Hello Maggie, considering you've also worked with some other prominent creators as well, like you also got other animators like James Lopez and Sandro Clurzo.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I got that name right. How is the big collaboration in order to go and create Hello Maggie after all these years?
Well, we basically started the process during COVID. And so we weren't able to travel. So all of our production meeting was done by Zoom. And of course, time differential between Florence, Italy, Toronto, Canada, and Los Angeles, we had to kind of coordinate these things. And it was all done by Zoom. And of course, today, I have no idea, you the usage of all the animation tools that are out there, like Cintiqs and computer animation and all that. So I kind of left it up to like James Lopez and Tony Tarantini to because they were pretty much expertise in those areas. And all I could do on the Zoom meeting is is sort of say, well, that drawing on the top of the page should maybe have a little more rounder cheek or something. I couldn't really sit there and demonstrate it in person.
Yeah, and how was working on an animated project during COVID? Is it like, do you find that it's a little more challenging than what you're used to, or are there some things that feel easier? Because like I understand it was a tough time for literally everyone.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah, I what I missed was, being able to hop on the plane and fly up to Toronto and have a meeting in person with their creative crew. And these are normally how films are made, like at Disney and Warner's. You would have a group session, sit down and throw out ideas, make little sketches, throw it on the middle of the table. And so I kind of miss being physically involved with the process. But, I guess with the new technologies and all that, it worked out fine because I'll be just like you see me on the screen like this, but I don't have my pants on. Oh, I didn't have to worry about the bottom half.
Nah, understandable. Sometimes if we could get away with it, like we'll allow ourselves to. Like we may not have human interaction, but hey, pants can be optional.
Oh, I tell you.
Yes. I believe we may have time for some questions from the audience.
Oh,
If
yeah.
any of you out there, if you would like to ask a question for Willie, feel free to write it in the chat, and I'll see. Okay, we do it by raising hands. Okay, just to understand the process. Let's see here. I see Jordan Wood. Your hand is up. So you could feel free to unmute and you could go and ask your question.
Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. My question was involving keeping motivated with animating because right now I'm working on my own independent animation and I tend to struggle with art blocks. So I was wondering if maybe you have those moments where it's like you're just sitting there with pen and paper or whatever else, and you just think like it's a struggle just for me to draw something. If there's anything you would say to keep yourself motivated to keep drawing.
Oh, yeah. We all go through that, and it's like well, your creative juices just isn't running on that day, and so you kind of sit there and you bother your neighbor by yakking, 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 and your neighbor is inspired. He's working away, and you're all over him. But yeah, we certainly have good days and bad days, and there are days sometimes that uh, it's surprising your output and how it just flows, and you're thinking to yourself, am I doing this because this is not even my style, but it just seems to be flowing. And that way too, what helped in my career was you discover uh, not only the style that you're accustomed to, your own style, but you could come up with other styles. And of course, when you work in the animation business, you have to conform to the studio that you're working with. So when I changed from Disney over to Warner Brothers, it was like a whole completely different style of characters. Fortunately, with the aid of model sheets, we're able to keep a consistency, and so so don't ever fret if you get, I guess what you might call writer's block. because you will be able to, move ahead and find yourself creating something unique.
I really
All right,
appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, very good. Next question, we got Thomas Carmen Stewart. You can unmute and feel free to ask your question.
Thank you. And it's pronounced Cameron Stewart.
Oh, Cameron, sorry.
That's okay. Anyway, just don't mistake it for my middle name. My middle name is Don. Anyway, my question is this: what is the normal amount of workflow if you're working on animating a character daily? I mean, I'm right now trying to practice. I'm right now drawing what seems like a monk, Shaolin monk practicing a bow staff form. It's about a minute long. It's based on a form that my martial art instructor taught me. And I've got up to like about 27 seconds done, but what I want to know is what's the normal amount of frames or uh, that you should try to do before the day's over?
Well, when I was at Disney, of course, the each drawing is like a piece of art, and so we were required to do one drawing an hour. So at the end of the day, if you had 8 drawings to turn in, you were on target. And so I finally got myself up to doing 7, maybe 8 drawings a day. And I felt, wow, I'm on target. And, back then it was 24 frames a second, And so when I started at Warner Brothers on my very first day, I did 13 drawings and I turned it in and I was very proud. I said, oh my gosh, at Disney I was doing 7, 8 drawings and now I turned in on my first day at Warner's 13. And one of my fellow roommates says, well, our target here at Warner's is 30 drawings a day. So I thought, oh, wow, that was somewhat of a rude awakening. Then when I was at Hanna-Barbera, I wasn't animating, but I was doing layouts. But the animators were turning out 100 feet a week. And it was a phenomenal demands that was put on us because it's always faster, cheaper, and so it was quite demanding, and so it's a lot of difference between studio to studio, and I think in your case, don't worry at this stage anyway. Don't worry about footage or how many drawings you can do. Just do your best drawings that you can.
I appreciate it, sir. Thanks for the advice.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. So our next one will go with Char Whaley. I believe you have a question. You can.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. In the world of generative AI, are you planning to use generative AI in the future? And secondly, how do you make iconic scenes in movies like Lady and the Tramp and the Gummy Bears? Like the spaghetti scene in Lady and the Tramp, I mean.
Well, see, like the spaghetti scene, it was considered one of the key scenes in the picture, and it was close up of the characters, especially Lady, and Lady had to be really drawn with a lot of care. So we had different animators working on the different characters and different cleanup guys and assistants and all. So the guys that were working on Trap, they could work fairly rough because he was kind of shaggy. But Lady was kind of sleek. She had these big eyelashes, and a lot of care had to go into it. So my mentor, my sensei, Iwo Takamoto, was a master of cute, beautiful characters, and so he was very fastidious about us following him up as his assistant to make sure that we maintain the same quality. So again, a lot depends on the kind of characters. Now, if you were working on like Aurora or from Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella or whatever, those characters, if you're able to maintain one drawing an hour, you're doing okay. But as far as AI, I haven't really kept up with it, so I have no idea what effect it may have in the future of the animation business. But I have seen many renaissance in the business when ink and paint departments were eliminated because we started using xerography, and Disney first did it with 101 Dalmatian, and that really set the industry afire because now we were able to turn out that much more footage, that much more faster. However, a lot of the ink and paint girls who were basically housewives and mothers and all that found a good way to have a little income coming in. But out of that pool, there were some very talented women that became animators and character designers and layout people and all that. So, it's the industry will continue to change. So by the time you guys are ready for the industry, it may be a whole different thing.
Yes, because I'm planning to use AI in my animation,
Okay.
and I'm trying to be respectful to the other artists and not anger them for accusing me for betraying to generative AI. And I'm trying to start a new animation renaissance. And I know some artists hate AI because it's for copyright reasons.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm planning to start my own animation studio.
Oh, good.
But I'm planning on, but I don't know where to begin. Is the problem.
Yeah.
Understandable. But unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of time for
Okay.
other questions because now we would like to go and present something very special. And we actually have Hello Maggie with us that we would like to share with you all. Willie, are you cool with presenting, like have a little screening of Hello Maggie?
I would love your people watching to enjoy the fruits of my labor.
Perfect. That was wonderful, Willie. My God, you must be so proud of that.
That was beautiful. Love it.
I certainly am. And many thanks to Tony Tarantini of Sheridan College in Toronto, Canada, whose beautiful layouts and pre-production work. And then, of course, our animators, young animators from Nemo Academia in Florence, Italy. So many thanks to you guys.
That was so bittersweet. Thank you for sharing.
It was certainly my pleasure. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Really,
Go ahead, Matt.
That was beautiful. Even though I didn't cry, it's still sometimes something beautiful.
and
Well, thank you.
Honestly, joy and
I think Matt wants to say
they
something.
remind us happiness.
Yeah, I just want to say this whole experience, not just watching Hello Maggie, but also just having this conversation, it really was a true honor. This is such a beautiful experience, and I want to thank you, Willie, for being here for this moment, and also thank you, Judy, for setting all this up. I mean, this was such a memorable time, and I think it's safe to say that for me, this is already one of my highlights of this year. Just as an animation fan and just in general, this was an incredible moment.
I really appreciate that, Matt. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Willie. Thank you, Matt. Thank you all of you out there. This has been just a memorable hour and a half. Thank you so much, Matt and Willie, for sharing. And for those out there, we hope to see you soon. But thank you again. And
Okay.
and Matt, finish it up with your tagline here.
Yes, so I believe with all that said, thank you all so much for coming here for this conversation and this little viewing of Hello Maggie. And until next time, see you later, dudes.
EBB, that's all, folks.
That's all, folks.
That's all, folks.